Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Aubrey Reeves, President and CEO of Business and Arts. Before we begin, I'd first like to take a moment to acknowledge that while Business and Arts is a national organization with staff in many territories, I'm speaking to you from Toronto. I have the honor to be a guest on the traditional lands and waters of the Petun and Wendat people, the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee Confederacies, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River, as well as many other Indigenous nations, some of whose names are no longer remembered. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work, to live, and to meet on these lands. Today's session will include the latest insights from the Arts Response Tracking Survey, or ARTS. This project is a partnership between Business and Arts, the National Arts Centre, and Nanos Research, with the support of Irfhan Rawji and CAMDO. The speaker series is made possible through the generous support of our long-term presenting partner, Power Corporation of Canada, as well as our supporting partners, RBC and Arts Consulting Group. This edition of the survey was in the field in October. The full arts report is now available in both English and French on our website. And we are happy to have ASL interpretation for today's session. Auto-generated English and French captions can also be turned on. Only the presenters and moderators will have our microphones on today, so please submit your questions in the Q&A box and vote for the ones you think are most relevant. The session is scheduled for 1 hour and 15 minutes to give us ample time for your questions. It's now my pleasure to welcome Nik Nanos to present the newest research findings from the survey. As the Chief Data Scientist at Nanos Research, Nik has led thousands of research projects in Canada and around the world, ranging from market studies, customer satisfaction tracking, creative testing, program development, and reputation management. Nik has also worked alongside many arts and cultural organizations, including the Ontario Arts Council, BC Arts, and a variety of museums and art galleries. So welcome, and over to you, Nik.
Thanks a lot, Aubrey. Great to join you and to share with everyone the latest tracking that we've done on behalf of Business and the Arts, the NAC, and everyone. And it was really interesting. You know, as Aubrey mentioned, we just finished the survey just a little over 2 weeks ago, and the focus of the survey had the tracking, but we also wanted to dig down a little deeper into donations. We have some tracking numbers on the donation front. We also have some new information that we're going to be sharing when it comes to donating insights. And let's just jump right in. On the tracking front, when it comes to expected frequency of attendance, and this kind of the changes between late August and now late October, you can see a little bit of less intensity of indoor events that are expected, but you know, for all intents and purposes, steady state, especially for museums and galleries, and even for outdoor events. But let's unpack some of these donation numbers. This is some of the tracking data that we have on this front. You'll see when we ask arts and culture goers their reported expected donations for 2025, the median, which is the midpoint, which covers at least 50% of the sample, the median expected donation for 2025 is $200, generally consistent across the board. You can see Quebec a little bit of a dip. We see that in a lot of the polling that we do in Quebec because Quebecers, compared to individuals that live in other parts of the country, are more likely to believe that it is very important for government to support arts and culture. So that kind of explains that. And you know, the other thing is you can see that the proportion planning to donate in 2025 a little higher in British Columbia than some of the other regions, and not a big surprise, higher among individuals that are over 55 years of age. And you know, one of the things that's really important to put on the table is that when we're talking about these donors, we're not talking about major donors. We're talking about what I'll call the community of arts and culture patrons, and people who go and frequent arts and cultural experiences. So, but that said, I did look at the numbers because obviously I had to kind of not just crunch, but look at some of the detailed tables. And this is not a statistical projection, but an observation in the sample of culture goers that did say that they were going to be donating in 2025. And there were two people that that said that they were going to give a donation of greater than $10,000, one $15,000. And here's another little anecdote that is not projected. All of them were women in this particular wave for the larger donations. But I think the key takeaway is that when we're thinking about the arts and culture community writ large, we're realistically that sweet spot of about $200 is probably what to expect and what would cover at least a majority of arts and culture goers. That said, the proportion of the donation wallet you can see on the left-hand side, pretty stable between 2023, 2024, and 2025, about $12 for every $100 donated. You can see British Columbia a little higher. Atlantic, we have to be a little careful with Atlantic because the sample's a little smaller. But I think, the key takeaway is that when it comes to the proportion of the donation wallet, we're at around $12. And we also have to remember that this is in the context of people being worried about their jobs. This is also in the context of arts and culture organizations competing with the food bank, competing with hospitals and things like that. So it's a pretty competitive landscape when it comes to donation dollars, but the good news is at least it's steady in terms of the proportion of the donation. And the median is a little higher than in the past, but positive numbers on that front. You can see the question at the bottom of this one is, do you recall or not being asked by an arts and culture organization to give a donation? You can see that 2 out of every 3 arts and culture goers do not recall being asked. And maybe this is one of the key things. We've asked this in the past and the numbers were generally similar. If you happen to be older, you probably recall being asked compared to younger individuals. And that same kind of dynamic that we saw in Quebec when it came to the median donation or charitable donation number being lower than other parts of the country. Also, the median in terms of recall being asked in Quebec also kind of playing itself out on that front. So, I think the key takeaway here is obviously there's still a lot of room straight out to ask. One of the things that we unpacked in this particular wave was to try to get a sense of what I'll say proximity. And by proximity, what we wanted to do and what we did was we asked the proportion of donations that went to different types of arts and culture organizations, whether they be local, you can see local arts and culture, ones that work across the regions, for example, serving more than one community or the whole province, and also national. And the key takeaway here, and I think this is one of the other key findings, is there's a significant proximity effect. Geography matters in terms of the distance or the proximity or closeness that an arts and culture organization has to folks in the community, and that you can see people almost by a margin of 3 to 1 say that they're more likely to send their dollars to local arts and culture organizations compared to ones that are more regional or provincial. And I think that's one of the key takeaways that people want to see people put a high value on the local arts and culture experience, and that they want to see those local arts and culture experiences continue to thrive. Top motivators, and each of these are kind of separate variables that could be asked. You can see impact. I'd kind of say impact and support. Really the key motivators, not just impact in terms of local community, but support, whether it be support for artists or just support for Canadian culture. We added this was a new factor that we added in 2025 because of all of the focus that Canadians have had over the last year or two on the importance of the Canadian identity, Canadian culture, and stuff like that. The other thing is that you can see one of the factors that interestingly increased in terms of a motivation was giving back to the community. And I think, you can see that's up 7 percentage points compared to last year when we asked this exact same question. I think a lot of this might have to do with heightened levels of sensitivity in terms of the local economies, but also wanting to make sure that, people want to make sure that they're supporting what's happening in their community. One of the new questions that we asked, and we hadn't asked this one before, had to do with asking individuals, arts and culture goers, about their employer and their level or different ways that they could be supporting arts and culture. And you can see that, the top mentions, and you can see they're all in blue on the furthest left. The most popular mention of ways of supporting had to do with outright sponsorship, followed by buying tickets, making a corporate donation to arts and culture organizations, through to encouraging employees to volunteer, and company-led volunteer groups and matching employee donations, about one out of a little less than one out of every 20, so that they do that. And I think maybe the other thing we'd like to put on the table is that 51% of arts and culture goers say, none of the above. My employer does not support the arts. And maybe this is perhaps another opportunity. And just to wrap it up before I throw it back to you, Aubrey, I think the key takeaways here is that the median donations are up compared to a year ago. The share of wallet is the same compared to a year ago. Proximity, the local angle, it's supporting artists and supporting culture is still the top motivators for giving donations. We can do a better job at asking folks within the arts and culture community to give. And then perhaps, and I'll put this on the table for discussion, perhaps there's an opportunity to better engage employers as another kind of opportunity to support arts and culture. And with that, I'm going to say I will be going into the chat part of the webinar, and I will be there to happily answer any questions that you have. And Aubrey, over to you.
Thank you so much, Nick. Really heartening to see some positive upswings in donation intention and also motivation. So I think we're going to have a great discussion. So with that, let me introduce our panelists today. So first up, we have Stash Bylicki, who is Executive Director of Chor Leoni, a choral organization that strives to engage and enrich the world through the art of choral singing in Vancouver. Under his leadership, Chor Leoni has grown to be one of the largest and most impactful choral organizations in North America, with a live and digital artistic component, robust art educational programming, a vibrant commissioning practice, a world-renowned volunteer and professional choir, and a deep-rooted connection with community. The organization reaches more than 30,000 patrons each year and strives to inspire the next generation of young singers. Stash is also a singer himself and a voice actor, and he sings bass in Chor Leoni's award-winning volunteer ensemble. And he was also a 2024 Business and Arts Emerging Leader and was recently recognized as a Business in Vancouver 40 under 40. So congratulations, Stash, and welcome. Next up, we have Heidi Reitmaier, who is the Executive Director of the Museum of Toronto. She has worked in the arts and culture sector for over 25 years. And she's a collaborative nonprofit leader focusing on strategic management, learning, audience engagement, organizational growth, strategic planning, philanthropy, and governance. Heidi is committed to audiences and fostering partnerships that support nonprofits throughout the city, the province, and beyond. In particular, Heidi is an Arts Fest mentor in our program. Most recently, she has been developing greater skills as a nonprofit leader to best build positive organizational health and to try and ensure equity and inclusion in all of her work. So welcome, Heidi. And finally, our third panelist is Laureen Bardou, who brings over 13 years of fundraising experience across the arts, education, and health sectors. With a dual background in art history and nonprofit leadership, she's worked with major museums in Montreal and abroad. She's a certified fundraising executive and a 2025 CFRE ambassador. She was twice named one of Montreal's top 50 influential women by Women We Admire. She is currently the Senior Director of Philanthropy at the Montreal Museum of Fine Art Foundation, where she leads its largest ever campaign. Passionate about the arts' role in social impact, Laureen views philanthropy as a force for change. She mentors emerging fundraisers and holds leadership roles with the Association of Fundraising Professionals locally and internationally. So welcome, Laureen, Heidi, and Stash. Let's get into it. So I'm going to dig in first with demographics. We did see a drop in donor intention among the younger age category, the 18 to 34, possibly indicating how much this group is feeling some economic pressures. There's certainly been a lot of discussion about that in the media of late. Starting with you, Laureen, what does the next generation of art donors look like to you? And how can we best adapt to strategies that appeal to these groups, while we also stay focused on continuing what works with those other reliable donors?
Well, thank you, Aubrey. Thank you, everyone, and bonjour. Do you hear me well?
Yes.
Perfect. So thanks for your question. The donor landscape is fundamentally changing, and it's driven by what we call the next-gen donors, so the next generation donors. We have at the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts Foundation a young philanthropist circle, and we have many donors, young donors under 40 there. And these emerging patrons are highly informed and intentional, viewing a gift as not as a transaction, but as the start of a genuine relationship. What they seek is involvement, connection, a sense of belonging, and they want to experience the museum differently. And they are far less tied to traditional institutions that past donors, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
So I think to meet this change and engage more the next gen, our strategy must evolve, and we need to elevate digital presence, and we must lean into the universal power of art and make our digital presence, like social media, online experiences, and interactive platforms, central to building an authentic community. We also need to maintain stewardship, because we are cultivating young donors, yes, but this new approach must successfully complement the essential ongoing stewardship of our reliable, long-standing supporters. So ultimately, I think we need a fully integrated 360-degree fundraising model. So the goal is to move beyond single transactions and foster a powerful, inclusive community that inspires people of all demographics to see themselves in our mission and to choose to philanthropically invest in it.
Mm-hmm. That's a tall order. Heidi or Stash, do you have any following thoughts?
I think the point about aging out donors and younger donors looking for something else, younger supporters looking for something else. We know they're interested in social causes. We know they're interested in the environment. We know they're interested in human and animal welfare, perhaps in a different way than previous donors. The question amongst institutions, and in my years, the experience is to how do we prove our impact? So unlike a food bank, or unlike an animal or a hospital that's treating children, one of our challenges is our kind of nebulous, if you like, impact. And so that are the tools we use to talk about, rather than just economic changes, because we're never going to compete with Google moving to Toronto. We're never going to compete with that kind of economic impact. How do we actually talk about the realities and the shifts and the changes that our work make to society or to a city or a place? And I think for me, that's one of the big challenges when you're communicating with this donor base.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm sort of on the tail end of I guess the younger demographic, the younger donor demographic. So I think about my own giving and my own inspirations for giving, and a lot of the time we're just trying to survive while we're watching the world burn. And so the connections to these organizations and these causes are need to be more authentic than maybe they have been in the past. I don't know necessarily what that means, but I tagged onto that word authenticity that you said, Laureen, because I think finding ways, and maybe in this case, it's the same as with an older demographic. You need to find meaningful ways for people to engage and build relationships with the organizations that we have. And a younger demographic just needs to be treated differently in terms of how those engagement opportunities are created and maintained.
Excellent. So, notably, the median donation amount of intended donations for 2025 has increased. And the median amount hasn't increased for several years when we've been tracking it in the Arts Response Tracking Survey. So that's very positive. And the top motivations we all saw, Nik detailed, have also gone up. Starting with you, Heidi, how do you interpret this positive upswing in giving? And is it something you are seeing in your own community?
I think the pandemic actually made a difference in that I believe people witnessed the impact of their commitment to local communities in a way that they hadn't. It slowed us all down. So we saw if we continue to support a local business, the first year the pandemic happened, by the end of the second year, you understood that your dollars were making a difference to someone. So I think that hyper local connection post pandemic is still alive. I wonder whether inflation, just people are conscientious, even though they're being hit. Some communities and some individuals are being hit. Others, their compensation is rising along with inflation. So they're recognizing, okay, my companies are acknowledging the fact that inflation is a big deal. So arts organizations are obviously going to feel the pinch as well. So I'm going to contribute more. There are a lot of, we didn't ask the question, or maybe we did, Nik, and you can clarify, but are people giving greater levels to fewer organizations? So we know we see things like the Ivy Foundation, some significant foundations, both here in Canada and elsewhere, are winding down. In that, what they're doing is they're making decisions to kind of give a greater amount and very specific donations to fewer organizations. So I'm wondering whether that is has impact. For us, we're lucky in a way because our model embraces interdisciplinarity and disciplinary projects. So when we're remounting a show at the moment on children's TV, but it's not just about TV, it's about education, it's about puppet making and creativity in the city of Toronto, it's about diversity of talent. So what we see is we're bringing in individuals from different sectors who maybe have never been to museums, and they're donating kind of across disciplines. So we're definitely seeing that approach as well being really impactful.
Stash, I see you nodding your head a lot. You have some.
Yeah, well, for us, and I'm just resonating with what she's saying. We have seen an uptick in donations, and I'd like to warrant it to some of the better fundraising tactics maybe that we're having with Chor Leoni, in building relationships with folks and giving them different avenues to give. I think technology is a big piece of that as well. The opportunities to make a donation are simply more frequent with us, and so hopefully that's paying off as well. Yeah, so I think that the digital means of giving and the opportunities to create more avenues are contributing to this, and I hopefully it continues.
Yeah, so you're picking up on that. The flip side of people haven't been asked. If they have been asked, they're more likely to give. So the more touch points, the more engagements you have with potential donors, the more likely you are to actually see some donations.
I was going to ask Stash a question. When you talk about multiple avenues for giving, one of the anxieties often organizations have is they don't want to bombard people. So I'm really curious to learn a bit more about this, the authentic, like your notion of the authentic and the multiple asks. Like, what are some of the ways you're approaching that? And
Mhm.
how are you being genuine in your integration? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. It's interesting because we're not a university. What happens with a university is they can call you 97,000 times a day because you're probably not going to go back and be a student there again. You might, but they have nothing to lose. We have a lot to lose if we ruin a relationship with people. But the flip side of that, and I know we're going to get into this a little bit later on. When I joined Corleone, my goal was to create an unabashed culture of philanthropy. And I think that in Canada, maybe, I don't know, I think that the natural response is to take a bit of a tiptoey,
Hmm.
I don't want to bother you approach to fundraising. And this is a conversation that I have with all of my board members when they come on board. The root of this is to switch the philosophy of why we're asking for money. It's not because, I'm on hands and knees and I need you to support me, even though that's really important. Um, it's I fundamentally believe that Corleone is changing the world. And if I'm asking you for money, I'm giving you the opportunity to change the world through the work of Corleone. So we have to reframe our perspective of why we give through the culture of opportunity, I think. And giving people an opportunity to make a difference in the world in a way that is meaningful to them. Your organization might not be that way for that person. That's okay. That's just the reality of the situation. But I think we need to have that shift. So often I hear that, how, am I bothering this person? Am I bombarding them? No, you're giving them an opportunity to change the world. Of course, there's a balance. You can't be calling a person again as 97,000 times a day, as I said before. But we should not be shy about talking about philanthropy, how important it is to our organizations, and the fact it's something that happens.
Hmm. Beautifully put. Laureen, I'm sure you're not shy, but there has been a fair bit of coverage lately in Quebec about how Quebecers lag behind the rest of Canada in giving, and we saw it in our own numbers there. Do you want to reflect a little bit on how the attitudes are a bit different in Quebec?
Yes, sure. But first, I will just second what Stash just said about the philanthropic mindset. We have to think about philanthropy from the dollar amount to the people relationship building. And that makes all the difference when you approach philanthropy like that with donors and with partners. So I totally agree 100% with you, Stash and Heidi. So yes, in Quebec. So Quebec has a distinctly unique philanthropic landscape. It's different in Quebec, The philanthropy here is shaped by its bilingual identity and by attitudes toward fundraising that differ significantly from those in other Canadian provinces. That doesn't mean Quebecers give less. It means to me that they give differently. So Montreal, for example, Montreal is so that it's my city. Is home for two complementary philanthropic cultures, each with its own giving habits and traditions. So you don't approach an Anglophone donor the way you approach a Francophone donors. It might take more time in one way or the other, but it's very complementary. So I just like to mention that Quebecers do not give less, they give differently. And at the same time, philanthropy as a structured practice is relatively young in Quebec compared to other provinces as well. Because of this dual philanthropic culture also, so it's more recent in Francophone culture to give than in the Anglophone one. So I think it's that makes all the difference.
Mm-hmm.
And you've seen it in the media recently that we have a lot of supporters of the arts and at major levels as well. So.
Mm-hmm. There was very clear data that most donors have a strong preference for local impact for where they want to put their dollars. The majority of these donors, nearly 60%, give to local organizations, opting to keep that support close to home. Heidi, you run the Museum of Toronto. That's a very specific locale. how does your organization communicate that local relevance to donors?
Well, I think we very much lean into the hyperlocal and the global. Toronto is a multicultural city and we are all in it together, but how we came here and how we belong to this place is very different. I think the nature of our work is super exciting and it leans really into what Stash and Lorraine were talking. Two elements is about authenticity, but also about people. Our work, we don't hold subject matter expertise in-house. We actually generate all our projects and exhibitions through this gathering of subject matter curators and experts. It's their voices that are addressing the politics of the city, nature, basketball. And we ensure that those voices and people are top of mind. They're very, very present. So for a recent show in basketball we had all, those that make high school basketball and have basically populated the NBA. All of those coaches and leaders in the community were top of mind when we were structuring the show and very present. We connect those with donors. So we don't distinguish between, we try, there is a sort of equitable or also access, which I think is really, really important. We're about building the networks. And when you think of any donor group or it's about the relationships that we build between people. I think the other thing for us is really making apparent, again, going back to this point of what impact do we make? We make really apparent a kind of transparent process, but it also means the impact is transparent. So when you have high school coaches at the opening crying because they've never seen themselves, visible in a story, in a way, talking to donors, donors are seeing and experiencing a kind of direct and immediate of their support. So I think that's really, really important to think about. Like we talk a lot about creating active citizens, that our work isn't necessarily, stating solutions to all the problems, but it's providing access to information so people can be more active participants in their city.
And Laureen, your museum also has a location in its name, the Montreal Museum of Fine Art, but it's a very large institution that really draws people from all across the region. Do you have any thoughts about that local, regional tension?
Yeah, sure. And like Heidi was saying, it's every arts organization is fundamentally a local organization. So with a local impact first, even if we are a worldwide well-known museum. So the donors wants to see their support make a difference close to their home or one of their homes. But so at the museum, we emphasize on how our programs, partnerships, and exhibitions directly benefit the community around us. So we share stories of local artists impacted by having an exhibition in the museum, about families going to our community engagement program or school programs and participant to those activities. So we show that every gift stays here first and strengthens the cultural fabric around them. So local relevance isn't something we create. It's who we are first. So
yeah, and Stash Chor Leoni is based in Vancouver, but you also tour and you have a robust digital presence. So how are you navigating serving that broader geography while maintaining those local connections?
I think for me, intuitively, I know that local is key for us. And Corleone, we always say Corleone is a choir of the community for the community. So it is at its core a group of 70 volunteer singers who give their time and blood and sweat to share music with the community. The programs that you're referring to, we have a really robust digital concert series now, and that's spread around the world. I love looking at the YouTube statistics, listened to in Germany and Peru and all over Asia, which is really great to see. And same with our tours and our albums. But I always frame the impact in a way that can be appreciated by local folks. So, for example, the digital concerts, They're an opportunity for anybody and everybody with an internet connection to experience the transformative power of Chor Leoni. And we tell stories of folks then that can't come to a concert anymore because they don't have the mobility, and they're able to sit at home and experience that in a really meaningful way. Even touring, we frame then through that local lens. It's an opportunity for these singers, these incredible people, to be ambassadors for Vancouver, for BC, for Canada, around the world, and not just share music, but share our personality and our culture and our love for the things that we do. So when we talk about these kinds of things, sometimes we do get donations and things like that through our digital concerts. Our digital concerts are the main avenue for our annual program. We get donations from the United States, from around, but the angle is always local. It's always local, and we always talk about how that's the core of what we do.
I would imagine a lot of your donors, particularly right now, are very proud to see Chor Leoni represent Vancouver and represent Canada on that world stage. So you're taking, as you said, you're ambassadors for Canada, which
I
is,
hope so. I
yeah.
hope so. Yeah, I definitely hope so. I think there's a certain aspect. This used to be back in the day, right? You travel, you always put a Canada flag on your bag because there's something that you're able to share. But um, uh, you know, may they feel that pride. But fundraising in a way is also it's a marketing activity. You have to help people feel that pride. And so that is the exercise that we go through with folks, whether it be one-on-one or the storytelling that we have, to help folks feel that is what we want
Mhm.
people to understand.
Mhm. Let's shift a little bit from individuals to corporations and businesses and their role in philanthropy. We did, for the first time, ask about employers supporting culture, and we saw a lot of opportunity because currently only 1 in 4 employed culture corps said that their employers supported arts in any way. More than half said they don't support the arts at all. So are we missing opportunities to connect with companies around employee engagement or community impact? Let's start with you, Heidi.
So I think it goes, yes, I think we are.
Mhm.
And I keep beating the same drum about impact, but I do think we need to be possibly, well, I think a couple things. We need to be more confident and possibly inventive. I think there's a huge number of skills that we have within our sector, and we sometimes forget that they're transferable. So I'll give you an example. A friend of mine who works in the Museum of South Texas for years has been offering services to doctors, trainee doctors. In the schools program, they work on slow looking and developing empathy and developing curiosity and listening skills in kids who come to multi visits in the galleries. And to take those programs and offer them to trainee doctors is actually providing them with skills to be more empathetic as in their bedside manner. So, very innovative way of saying, oh, actually, we develop these soft skills that are so essential in the classroom, and actually they're really applicable in the real world. So that's one. I think the other is really thinking big. I think sometimes we go to companies and we ask for a handout or we ask for a bit of money. Decades, well, it was decades, but years ago when I worked at Tate, there was this really inventive leader I had who was head of marketing and digital, and he was like, every child born in the UK should get a Tate box, which is rather than get a box of diapers, every child should get a Tate Grow baby. They should get a lifetime membership to Tate.
Mhm.
They should be welcomed into these programs. It was literally this kind of insane, but kind of magical notion that you're working with a company or you're working with a public entity to really think about large scale. So I think we sometimes forget, like, what happens if employees, they get a gym membership and they get a membership to the Montreal Museum of Fine Art. And I
Mhm.
mean, the prescription around wellness is a program that's so inventive, but I think we can be more inventive or more ambitious about how
Mhm.
we approach the sector.
Mhm. Yeah, sure. Dash, what type of partnerships, and I'm thinking sponsorship versus corporate philanthropy, align best with employee expectations today in your mind?
Ooh, what employee expectations? I think, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of employees. I think there's two things. One, when we're talking about folks not knowing what their companies are supporting. One is maybe they're not supporting, and two is they're not good at communicating
Hmm.
what that support is. Um, I come back to that idea of authenticity and people wanting authenticity, especially maybe like a younger generation, and the classical avenues of sponsorship maybe feel a little transactional. It's like, oh, this is it. I wouldn't tell my employees that, I'm putting up an ad on the TV. And very often sponsorship relationships might feel like simply a marketing thing. I want to get my logo up on a thing. Converse of that, I guess, is corporate philanthropy can also feel maybe passive, where you're giving a check and there you go. That's kind of it. So I think the answer, the expectation is actually somewhere in the middle, in these innovative approaches that Heidi was talking about. Um, Finding a way that support can happen, but that then employees can be engaged in the thing in an authentic way. One is either through, corporate giving programs, volunteerism, opportunities for that, but the other is communicating the impact of the
Hmm.
gifts. I think very often sponsors and organizations think about maybe their values alignment with who they're trying to support and how it's going to affect their customers and their potential customers.
Hmm.
And they don't think about building that pride within the employee base that they're working with. So, that's all nicely said and done because, there's these big banks and they get it. They know how to do that kind of work. But what do you say to a small potential sponsor that you don't tell them that they need to create a robust engagement plan for their employees? I think what I tend to tell them is you need to be proud of your support and you need to communicate that with folks.
Hmm.
And I will help you. I will give you anything that you possibly need in order to communicate that support. We know that people resonate with giving when it's to something specific. So knowing exactly the people, the faces, the individuals, exactly what you supported. So if I can help organizations have the fodder to the information to be able to pass on to everybody, then I think we're doing a good job in advancing this.
Well, I think the arts have an advantage, actually. We have one way of allowing corporations share their pride, which is bring their employees to shows, to the museums, actually have them go. So, that is a really good starting point for sharing that pride. I think one of the most visible ways that a lot of corporations support um, health charities is through runs and those kind of big events where they get so many employees to be involved. So I'm wondering, Laureen, if you have any thoughts about engaging employees in that kind of participation in the arts.
Well, that's a very good question. And to just a second, Stash comments on sponsorship versus corporate philanthropy. I think, as an organization, you can do both with the same company as well, and you can reach to both the envelopes of funding available as well. So at the museum, so we are actually offering some recognition programs like team building opportunities for employees or special visits with the curator or to get to see the exhibition at after hours or this kind of thing. So we offer that kind of experience and engagement of the of the employees of the different companies that support us, and they can come to workshop at the museum as well, and get together and see the arts and the benefits of the arts in action as well.
Yeah.
Aubrey, one of the challenges, certainly from our perspective as we're building, is the traditional path of building like membership activities for this group or donor activities for this group, or so you end up either having many layers of activity and your resources are stretched so thin.
Yeah.
So I'm super curious about how do we use our activities that we're already producing multiple ways. How are we more strategic when we have a relationship with a corporation, or like how can we, in a sense, offer them a much larger package so it's a deeper relationship rather than multiple relationships? I don't know if other people feel this, but going from large institutions working in a smaller institution now, that is one of, it's like, how do you just manage resources? Because it's great to say we're going to have a membership group or 17 donor groups, but you can't sustain it, and the return is never enough. And then, and then this point about transaction, it's like, well, this person got these 3 visits and we only got 2 visits, and our price points are, we all know the drill. So I guess it's like thinking of ideas where we can multi-purpose activities, or even just the core activity, the core things we do. How can we be more inventive with those things? How can we generate? Yeah, I get that's so. Stash, to your point about, you do one concert, it's local, it's national, it's digital, it's you're multi-purposing content in a way.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think like to say we're lazy. We should be lazy in terms of creating these opportunities and overlapping the Venn diagram as much as possible. We're expanding one of our youth programs to something we're calling our youth program is called My Voice. So it's about introducing young people to the transformative power of choral singing, and it's free. But we're expanding it with a new program called My Voice Access. And it's an opportunity for young people to come in and experience Chor Leoni for free. Now, we've always done this in a way. We've always had youth tickets and things like that. But we thought to ourselves, we do dress rehearsals every concert, and nobody sits there, and why not fill that space and create and then transform it under the auspice of that youth program and that youth opportunity. So, and it's not an answer to your question, but it's just an echo of trying to find as many of these overlaps as possible and make these stewardship and impact opportunities as easy without draining our resources. And I'll just say, there's a lot of people on this call, and I know everybody is feeling constrained. So this is the key, to unlock that opportunity.
Yeah.
Well, that it's a good point to segue to our Q&A box. We actually have several questions about the relationship between donors and volunteers, and this might be again a place where you might be able to overlap. So we had some questions. To what extent are younger age groups shifting from donations to volunteering if they're feeling that economic pinch? And then conversely, how do you convert those volunteers into donors? Anyone want to jump in on those?
So maybe I'll go.
Sure.
So to become a member of the Young Philanthropist Circle at the MMFA Foundation, for instance, well, you have to give. So the donation is the first gesture, and you've probably seen the events of that circle before, and then you enter in that committee volunteering, but you are already a donor. So we try to have both included in one package, one conversation.
Yeah.
I think having worked in the States for 6 years, where there's obviously a very different relationship to philanthropy, and I remember one of the earliest conversations I was talking about volunteers because I was in the education department and we have volunteers give tours, and someone in the philanthropy department fundraising was talking about volunteers. And in my head, I was thinking, what volunteers are they talking about? And to them, they're senior volunteers. Those are volunteers, the people on your board, the people on your
Mhm.
committees, the people, everyone in this pool is volunteers. So I think that's the first clarity, Aubrey, whether somebody gives $10 or $1 million, if they're both serving the organization with their time, they are
Mhm.
volunteers. So I think that in Canada, I've noticed there's this demarcation between the people who pay to play, and the people who just give time. And I would like, to Lauren's point, like actually they're all volunteers. Um, I think I can't remember the question. That was my point.
It was
I have
just
no
really
idea
the
what
relationship.
I.
What is the relationship between volunteers and donors? And I think it can be summed up as these are your biggest fans. Whether
Yes,
they're giving
yes,
time or whether they're giving money, they're the people who care about you the most.
yes,
Mhm.
Vol
yes, yes,
Volunteers are philanthropists, and
Mhm.
that full
yes,
stop. Full stop. They're philanthropists of their time. We say time, talent, treasure, right? That's the adage. In Corleone, it's an interesting dynamic. In fact, I just moved our volunteer management under our manager of philanthropy because I think that is one of the things that philosophically we needed to shift. For us, it's a very interesting dynamic because um, the singers of Corleone are also volunteers.
Mhm.
They give hundreds of hours every single year to this. And we have this interesting dynamic between, is it like a soccer team where you play and you get these amazing experiences, or are folks giving of so much of their time? I think the answer is somewhere in the middle. They're getting a lot and they're giving a lot, but we have to look at all of these constituencies as just as important as our major donors. It's so much harder than it sounds. Because, of course, if
yeah,
somebody comes across and wants to give you $50,000, you're going to treat them like royalty. But um, there are opportunities within those volunteers that are also unlocked. We often say also volunteers are great prospects for planned gifts.
yes.
And you have to remember that those are conversations that you can always have with people.
Mhm.
I think the other interesting thing is thinking the difference between, and I think Stat, you said it, is they're giving and you're giving. So what is it's less an exchange, and it goes back to this point about relationships. And one of the smartest programs, I think, was, or, often docents who are working
Mhm.
inside large scale museums. It's shifting that from docents are gifting you something with their time, they're giving you tours, but how can you also support them with new learning and kind of expanding
Mhm.
their curiosity and expanding their knowledge? And then it becomes reciprocal, right? It's not about, oh, well, I'm giving you this time and I'm offering a tour to a visitor and that's me doing you a favor. It's actually, it becomes about a relationship, and the institution is gifting and the person is gifting. So it's how do you move into that space where it's a mutual growth experience?
Mhm. There's
And
also
that,
an, yeah,
yeah,
go ahead.
no, no,
Uh, there's also an interesting comment in the chat about how 64% of the 2,700 museums across Canada are volunteer run. So the vast majority of volunteers in of museums in Canada are really operated entirely by volunteers. So that also changes the dynamic where, they're making it all happen.
yeah,
So, yeah.
yeah.
So returning, you mentioned very briefly social prescribing. We have a question about that in the Q&A box. They're wondering, would social prescriptions for mental health be a way to quote unquote prove the worth of cultural institutions? Is that a compelling way for us to make the case about the value of our organizations?
We use the social prescriptions to make a case to our donors. Sometimes the donors want to give to our community engagement programs, so these kind of things. So it helped us a lot, but I think it's a collaboration and partnerships between different institutions, and the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts was one of the pioneer museum to do that in Canada. So yeah, we're still doing that magnificent project. It's an ongoing project, and we are trying to develop it. Does that answer your question?
Anybody else have thoughts about
Aubrey,
social?
I think it goes back to that, or it goes to a point where, and this is about resource, so I'm gonna be contradictory here, but I think building programs that have research embedded in them. So the program I was talking about, South Texas, that idea of proving the value of taking medical trainees through this program and demonstrating that they have more empathy at the end of it. That program was designed with the theory of change research built into it, so it was never an add-on. And with the core understanding that we need to be always updating our research, we need to ensure that it's part of the process, whether it's reflection documents from the doctors, whether it's, face-to-face research with the patients, whatever the tools are, we need to ensure that that is built into the process so that when you come out the other end, you can demonstrate impact. And I think social prescribing is no different than that. Writing the prescription is the evidence or the consequence of the fact that it is being proven that if people go to a museum, they're less stressed. So we need to write them prescriptions to do this thing, which makes them better.
Yeah. There certainly has been a fair bit of research about the benefits of singing together, Satash. Is this an argument you're making at all when you're either, enticing new volunteers or donors?
Yes, in a way. I'm not as versed in the specific research because I think it's more intuitive than that, right? We're talking about people singing together in harmony. Like, what better metaphor is there for the world and what we want the world to be? So that's the language that we use. So, simply said, I think it's intuitively known if we all sang together, the world would be a better place. And so, that's the kind of stuff we don't go into, the psychology and all that kind of stuff, which is there. I mean, there's amazing psychology about the power of music, but we talk about it in a far more simple way, I think, and I think that really resonates with people. We talk about it not just in the opportunity to experience music, the temporal art, you're feeling, you're undergoing some sort of transformation when you're sitting in an audience, especially when something's special, but also creating an opportunity for singers to create something beautiful. I think in a place like Vancouver that's so expensive to live in, having a place where people can share their talents like that is important. And then the third is our youth programs. So we use that type of language in our youth programs as well. When these young people are given the opportunity to sing in a choir together, they're not just learning musical skills, right? It's about far more than just the technical skills. It's empathy, it's sensitivity, it's vulnerability, it's all those kinds of things. So I just gave you a bit of my case for support because you spur that with that kind of research talk, because that's exactly what we talk about and how we inspire folks.
Heidi, earlier you talked about being in the US and the culture of giving or the attitudes to philanthropy are different there. We have two kind of related questions that touch on that. One is asking how the sector can work together as a whole to encourage donations in the arts. So, how do we cultivate that culture of giving in Canada? And then the other one was really thoughts on the evolution of philanthropy as a verb, and especially for the younger generation. So essentially both asking, how do we stimulate collectively as the arts sector an attitude towards giving?
So I know, so first off, I think, yes, coming together and conversations like this, but also I think in Canada, we could be, whether this is happening amongst major institutions, I don't know, but the idea of how to foster and ensure, and things like the um, Toronto Foundation is doing that work, is like introducing individuals to how you give. In the States, it's incredibly interesting because it is intergenerational. So one of the findings I discovered is if someone has given to a major, so where I worked was MCA Chicago. It was founded by four families who were not accepted onto the board at the Art Institute because they were Jewish. So they were basically like, we're going to start our own museum. And they did, and they donated their collections to make that work. They're now, their grandchildren are still giving to those organizations. So there is within the families kind of understanding that there is an obligation. They also train up children to literally, they take them on philanthropy conferences. They help them understand how to read spreadsheets. So anyway, that's the nature in America. I think in Canada we could be more strategic coming together as arts leaders to think about whether we run conferences that bring in major donors alongside leaders of cultural institutions to kind of shore up that education and knowledge on both sides. I think cities and national organizations could help us bring together donors again, like whether it's tours, whether it's introducing people to different organizations. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think I don't think we're particularly strategic because we've been very reliant on government grant and corporate. And I think probably as the sector shifts and the world is changing, we probably need to figure out a way that we can be a little bit more collaborative in how we approach it. Yeah, because Canada, there are a lot of, I'm speaking particularly about major donors, because I think, and you'll have to, I mean, Nik would know this statistic. My understanding is Canada, people give more donations at lower levels in Canada than they do in America.
That is true, yes. We have seen some data comparing Canada, the UK, and the US, and this average individual donation overall in Canada is less than half of the US. We see a significant lower personal giving rate. But and we've also seen there's the StatsCan data. We've seen a drop in individual giving in Canada over the past 25 years, from 27% of tax filers registering a tax receipt to just 17%. So that's a pretty major drop over the past 20 years. But the total dollar amount has remained the same because of those major donors. Major donors in older demographics are making up the difference. They're giving more. But that does create a demographic cliff that the charitable sector as a whole, not just the art sector, but the whole charitable sector is facing.
I mean, also our taxes are totally different. I mean, you just don't get the same tax relief that you do in the United States. So, a bit of lobbying and a bit of transformation on that tax relief would make a huge, I mean, Laureen, you can probably talk to that much more than I, but that is a massive difference, is it not?
For sure. So we should do some lobbying and work together. But I just wanted to add that we don't have to be shy to be in the arts because we are asking people and supporters for money. And remember, we are not asking for money. We are asking for opportunities for them to help for the future of the organization. So it's so we have to come together and work more together and also across sectors. So not only within the art sector, but with other sectors as well. In Quebec, we do a lot of that. We gather among fundraisers as peers, and we talked about different ways that we can work together to elevate the Quebec province philanthropy as a whole as well. So yes, we need to gather together within the arts sector across Canada, but also with other sectors as well, and talk to our peers.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I would also add that we just need to inspire each other
Yeah.
in what I was saying before, that kind of unabashed culture of philanthropy. What every once in a while, and I remember this from back in the day that somebody once told me that the evolution of philanthropy, the UK is like 10 years behind us, and we're 10 years behind the United States in terms of how people are thinking about philanthropy. Maybe I don't want to say aggressive, but in how often and how bold we are in some of these asks. So every once in a while, when I need a slap in the face, I go and chat with my American colleagues. And they're the ones to really light a fire under me to say, no, like you should be more bold in these conversations that you're having, and how you're talking about the impact that's happening, and that's been part of my personal transformation in how we talk about philanthropy in Cor Leoni, and how it is everywhere. The asks aren't as prevalent everywhere, but we talk about philanthropy as the lifeblood of the organization.
Someone gave me a really good piece of advice in the States when I first arrived down there. They basically said, you realize if they're agreeing to have lunch with you, they know there's an ask. Like they're not idiots. It's like so if someone comes to an event and, whether it's putting a leaflet on a chair and saying, please join us in supporting, if someone is coming, Aubrey, it's your point earlier, they're all ambassadors. They're all your best friends. They're all people who are interested in the work you're doing. So to your point, don't be shy, I guess, is like people understand that it is a relationship that you're trying to build. So if you remember that and not think you're the person with the, passing the hat, even buskers, you stop, you understand if you spend more than 3 minutes watching a busker, the hat's going to come out and you're making a commitment to that. So I think it's just recognizing that there's an understanding on both sides.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. And a well-crafted ask is never, never inappropriate. Yes, you need to prepare and everything and do
Yes.
your homework and everything. But if you ask confidently, if you ask consistently, and it's well prepared, it's never inappropriate. So just don't be shy and
Yeah.
ask.
Yeah.
But know your donors.
Yes, yes. The other thing someone gave me a piece of advice too is, when you have the cycle of the ask, which is also like listen, spend time listening. Around to your point, know your donors, know what they're interested in, know what pulls at where their interest lies, so even in the work that we do, there are going to be specifics. So spend some time listening.
Exactly.
Yeah, which I think is a really good piece of advice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that brings us to the end, and I think a really positive, energizing conclusion. A big thank you to our panelists, Heidi, Stash, and Laureen, for contributing your insightful thoughts and responses to this research and answering the questions from our audience. Thank you to Nik Nanos for your analysis of the data. My big takeaway, I think, is to be unabashed. As we head into this holiday giving season, I encourage everyone in our audience to feel bold and proud of what you do as arts organizations. Be inspiring and don't be shy about making that ask. Just a heads up, December 2nd is Giving Tuesday, so it's not very far away. It could be an opportunity for you to build some of those relationships. Thank you to the National Arts Center and Nanos Research for continuing to partner with us on the Arts Response Tracking Survey. Thank you to CAMDO and Irfhan Rawji, who are also continue their support. Big thank you to Power Corporation of Canada. They are a presenting partner of the Business and Arts Speaker Series. And also thank you to RBC and ACG, our supporting partners of the Speaker Series. Finally, I'd just like to take a moment to highlight that nominations are open for the 2026 Business and Arts Awards. We have 5 awards which recognize exceptional volunteers, donors, philanthropists, leaders who have made significant contributions to the arts in Canada. You can be a part of the celebration by nominating yourself or another champion of the arts. You can learn more by visiting businessandarts.org/nominate. The deadline for nominations is coming up on December 15th, so I encourage everyone to take a look at that. And if you want to learn more about any of Business and Arts programs and events, please head to our website for more information or follow us on social media. Many thanks and have a wonderful rest of your day.